Pretty much every photographer who makes photos on the street has an opinion on what is or isn't classed as street photography. This is often hotly debated and it can be quite a polarising subject. It's understandable though, because as artists we're always in search of an identity and a style that's our own to show the world. And sometimes definitions, or a framework to work in, can help us work out what our identity is and the direction we want to explore as an artist. If you're a beginner street photographer looking to find out what it's all about, it can be quite confusing and there's a lot of opinions floating around. So in this video, I'm going to explore the definition of street photography, show you some of the different types of street photography that you can do, as well as recommend a couple of great books to help you along your street photography journey. So, what is street photography? The Encyclopedia Britannica defines street photography as a genre of photography that records everyday life in a public place. And I think that's a solid, concise definition. Next, I asked ChatGPT for its definition of street photography to see what AI comes up with. And its definition is, street photography is a genre of photography that captures candid, unposed moments of everyday life in public spaces, often emphasising the human element and the unique interactions between people and their urban environment. Pretty good? And lastly is my definition of street photography, which is candid photographs taken in a public space that capture humanity in some way. By candid, I mean photographs that are not staged. For me, that's the main rule. I just don't stage my street photographs. Generally, the photos I make while out of my home that includes humanity in some way, I define as street photography. That could be showing humans literally, or showing things made by humans, or both. I clearly make my work under that definition, and that's why I call myself a street photographer. Now, this doesn't mean that the photos I take are good street photographs, or street photography that you want to look at, and that's okay. Art is subjective after all. I think what makes a great street photograph is a topic for another time, though I'll touch on this later on in the video. Let me know in the comments if you agree and how you define street photography yourself. Carolyn Drake, who's a Magnum photographer, says, "I think every photographer should define what the street means to them in their own way. There's no one way of defining street photography." And to be honest, there is no right or wrong way of defining street photography, and most importantly, you should never feel boxed in by definitions or people's opinions at all. You may take photos in a public place and not define yourself as a street photographer and not call your work street photography, which is absolutely fine. Or you might make work you call street photography even though others don't agree, and that's absolutely fine too. A quick note on the legality of street photography. It's perfectly legal in the UK to take photos of people in public, and there's a long and celebrated history of photographers documenting life on the streets here. However, always make sure to check the law in your own country, or when you go travelling. When it comes to photography of people in a public space, it's not always accepted. I can't recommend this book enough for a full history of street photography. It's brilliantly written and has tons of examples, and it makes for a great book to pick up for quick inspiration to go out and shoot. It's just fantastic, and it's a gold mine of information as well as the history of street photography. As an artist, it's really important to see the work that has come before you so you can make sense of the past, be inspired, and find a path for your own work. Also, I recently picked up this book, which is a concise and wonderful collection of images and text on the street photographers of Magnum. I'll pop a link in the description for both books if you want to check them out. So now we've defined street photography broadly, what kinds of street photography can you try that falls under that definition? There are a bunch of different, I guess, like subgenres of street photography, and the following are a few themes and types I like to explore in my street photography that you may want to experiment with too. Documentary style street photography. This is where you include environmental context and tell a story about a place or a subject, or both. Going to an event like a protest or a demonstration can be a really good place to experiment with photography like this. Abstract street photography. This is where you can include textures such as reflections, shooting through objects, and masking areas of the image to make less figurative, more abstract work. Subject-driven photos including candid portraits. This is where you make the focus of your image a person in a more figurative way. You may want to try and capture moments of emotion and try to portray the story of a person, making them into the hero of the image. Light and shadow. You can play with light and shadow to frame your subjects as well as create mystery, mood, and texture. I made a video on tips for light and shadow in street photography which you can check out if you're interested. Details. This is where you focus more on details on the street, maybe using a longer focal length to isolate interesting elements of people or textures, leaving out contextual information. This can generate a bit of curiosity in the viewer and lead the viewer putting their own story into the image. Silhouettes. Using harsh light sources and dark shadows, you can create silhouettes which can make for captivating images. Minimalist street photography. This is where you make more stripped back images that are more simple and less complex, often highlighting the scale of an environment and usually shot on a wider lens. This is a great type to try for beginners as it allows you to be further away from your subject, and it can be less nerve-wracking to do that when you're just starting out. Night street photography. Night street photography is a whole different beast, but it's a lot of fun. It's easier in the colder months when it gets dark earlier, and also in a place where you have a lot of artificial light sources, like the centre of a city. Check out my video for night street photography tips if you're interested as well. Travel street photography. This is one of my favourite kinds of photography because I love to travel. With travel street photography, the aim is to incorporate a sense of place to the images and stories you want to tell from where you're visiting. Now, not exactly subgenres, but you may want to experiment in black and white or colour. You may choose to limit your work to one or the other, or choose both. The possibilities are endless, as they say. So what makes a good street photo? Well, that's the million-dollar question, and I think that deserves a whole video on its own. But in a nutshell, for me, what makes a great street photo is a combination of 4 things: timing, composition, light, and story. If you can get a strong sense of those 4 things, then the chances are you're going to make a great image. So for example, in this photo I found a really strong composition with leading lines, layers, and a sense of place. The light was really great too, with the soft ambient light from twilight and a nice glow from the street lamps. What I needed now was a subject and a story. In the end, I didn't need to wait very long for a person to walk down the steps, and when they did, I waited for the right moment and snapped off the shutter. For me, the timing is spot on, framing up the subject and capturing an interesting stance. All the elements came together to create a great story as well, with a strong sense of mystery and intrigue. Where is this place? Who is that person? What are they doing? And the fact you can't make out much of their figure adds to the story. So for me, this is a really strong street photo. Composition, light, timing, and story, tick. Great street photos are like a little treat. You look at it and it makes you feel something. And while that's very hard to achieve, the process of trying to make those little delights that we call great street photographs is just the best thing to spend your time doing, in my opinion. Street photography at its core is all about creativity and connecting with the world around you. Ultimately, how you define your photography and define yourself as an artist is up to you. If you choose to call yourself a street photographer or a photographer full stop, then that's absolutely fine. Or if you prefer a different term like visual artist, or however you want to label what you do, then that's absolutely fine too. Anyone that tells you otherwise isn't worth replying to. While street photography is one of the most fun types of photography you can do, it can also be very challenging. So to put some of the ideas discussed in this video into action, and to look at ways you can improve your street photography, then be sure to check out this video here.